Are you wondering what Irish tourism might look like for the rest of 2020 and into 2021? I did too, so I gathered three of my favorite Ireland travel experts to join me as we discuss Ireland travel predictions for the rest of this year and into next. All right. So, thank you everyone for joining me today here on the Traveling in Ireland podcast. Today's episode is just a little bit different. I have with me three very impressive guests who have incredible Ireland knowledge, and we are going to talk about Ireland travel predictions for the rest of 2020 and into 2021. So, today I have with me Tina O'Dwyer, Pól Ó Conghaile, and Stephanie Chastain. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, just a tiny snippet of why I have chosen you. I think it will come out pretty clear once you tell us what you do. So Tina, would you like to go first?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me, Jodie. I'm Tina O'Dwyer. I live in County Clare on the West Coast. My business is the tourism space, and I work very closely with tourism business owners and managers, offering training and coaching and professional development supports.
Excellent. And Paul?
So I'm Pól Ó Conghaile. I'm the travel editor with the Irish Independent here in Ireland, and I'm responsible for the print content, the destination coverage, the travel news, and the social media there. So I keep in touch with travel in Ireland and travel overseas.
And Stephanie is a return guest to the podcast. So Stephanie, would you tell everybody who you are?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me again, Jodie. I'm Stephanie. I am the travel creator at infiniteireland.com. I do very much similar to Jodie here. I write blogs about Ireland as well as help people plan their trips.
Excellent. So as you can see, I have three very knowledgeable people joining me today to talk about Ireland and what we might be able to expect as these travel bans lift. Of course, none of us have a crystal ball. These are just maybe some feelings that we have going on or what we are garnering from news we read. So Ireland right now is on a 2-kilometer lockdown, which is to lift on May 5th. Now, Tina, your 2-kilometer lockdown is a lot different than Paul's, because you live in the west of Ireland and Pól lives in Dublin. So there's a vast difference, while not in the distance you can go, but in the experiences that you're able to have when you do step out of your house.
Yeah, I guess so. So I don't have anything to compare it to. I know certainly here we feel, and we say it often, really lucky that we're living in the countryside and that there's far worse places to be in lockdown than where we are, for sure. The weather has been fantastic. So it's very green, there's birds singing all the time, there's blue skies, we've had the most amazing sunshine, or sunsets, sunrises and sunsets. So it's been great. We're spending a lot of time outside. My favorite place to go for a walk is Lahinch Beach, and that's beyond my 2 kilometers. It's about 5 kilometers. So I feel very tempted all the time to go, but I haven't been. But still, there's quite a few people, who would be near beaches or, small villages and stuff. And it's really quite nice, I have to say.
I actually spoke with Ben Bennett this morning, who owns the surf clinic there in Lahinch.
In Lahinch, yeah.
And he's right there at the beach. He said he surfs maybe 5 hours a day right now.
Yeah. They have the beach to themselves, yeah.
Yes, really. They do. So, Pól, how are you getting out? Are you near anything great? One of the parks or anything that you can get out to, or are you kind of stuck to the city streets there?
No, I'll tell you where I am. I'm actually at the end of the Dart commuter line in Greystones, County Wicklow. So although in the normal run of things, I'm in and out of Dublin all the time, it's about a 50-minute ride on our commuter train. I'm on lockdown at home in our house, and our 2 km radius is not bad. It just about takes in a sliver of coastline along the Irish Sea, and we have a little forest nearby, and we've been spending time just before I came on to speak to you guys, we did a big walk. We got our binoculars out, a few drinks and a few snacks into the backpack, and walked around that radius. And we've been discovering local history and the big houses that form the estate here, and looking for, you know, little tracks and trails we haven't done before, and bird watching like you have never believed. Who knew this kind of soap opera was going on around us in the hedges and the trees? So yeah, look, we are one day we've got cabin fever and we're fed up, and the next day we feel grateful that we are healthy and all together. So I'm the same as many people, I imagine.
Yeah,
I think that's true the world over. I know that there are good days and bad days. And Stephanie, you're in a college town in Pennsylvania where things have to be eerily quiet without all those students.
Yes, indeed. It is very, very quiet. Now, granted, we are on lockdown, so we're not going anywhere to see anything or visit anything. But even the grocery stores that would normally be packed with students, you know, getting everything from, you know, ramen noodles and, you know, whatever they would normally be getting are just empty. So it is quite sad to see, actually, but you know, all for the best to, you know, to stay healthy.
And you know, here in Iowa, we are not on lockdown, but we're a very rural state. So I can still go out for bike rides and go to the state parks, although we do a lot of camping and we can't do that. Those things are all restricted to us, but we're pretty lucky here as well. So right now, the lockdown in Ireland is set to end on May 5th. Paul, you are probably the one who would get the news fastest, being part of the news media there. Does it look like that is still going to be the end date, or does it look like things could go longer?
It does look like things can go longer. So lockdown isn't going to end on the 5th. That's the sort of the outer limit of the current restrictions when they were given a couple of weeks ago. So we are expecting an announcement and an update in the next week to tell us what's happening next. And an optimistic scenario would be a gentle easing of restrictions. Now, this is all speculation, and everything we say has got a COVID-19 health warning on it, but it might include things like letting older people out for some brief daily exercise. At the moment, the over 70s are being asked to cocoon in Ireland, which means stay in their homes. It may mean DIY and gardening stores are allowed to open, or that our 2K radius is sort of relaxed notionally. I can't see anything more than that. I'd be pleasantly, you know, it would be nice if there was, but we're so far as a country, we've largely bought into the messaging here and what needs to happen to keep people safe and contain this thing. But there's definitely a brewing cabin fever and a danger of complacency. So that's what the government is balancing at the moment. It's how to give us something small to hold on to, but without sort of just, you know, we need to stay the course, and they don't want to jeopardize the progress we've made.
Of course, of course. Now I know that on my end, and I'm sure Stephanie, you can add to this. I am having a lot of contact with people who have trips planned, maybe for May and June, or May, June, July. I do know that a lot of tour companies have canceled trips into mid-July, and airlines have been canceling flights. So obviously there are a lot of tourists who had travel planned that are maybe have a lot of worries or have been left scrambling. Stephanie, I'm sure that you are getting a lot of emails and things of that nature as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, the general consensus from, you know, industry leaders, as well as, you know, just anecdotally, is that, you know, the spring and most of the summer is really out of the question. And, you know, fall is certainly still quite up in the air. And I don't think that we can very positively say, you know, that anything is going to be for certain until we get a better handle, you know, through the spring and through the summer. And so it is disappointing. I've had I've had honeymoons canceled, and multi-generational trips that your heart pours out for these people who have been planning this amazing lifetime trip. But lifetime trips can wait as long as everybody stays healthy. So it's just juggling all of the other things that have to go along with canceling or rescheduling a trip. It's working with the airlines, it's working with the accommodations. I have had wonderful contact with the service providers in Ireland about changing and postponing, and I am just so pleased and not surprised by any means about how well people have kind of come together to support each other on all ends of the spectrum.
Right, and that's the same thing I'm seeing, is that people are very happy to work with those who have booked in to reschedule and get them in, even if it is a year out or maybe a little bit more. And Tina, I know that you work with a lot of tourism businesses who are doing this type of, reschedule, don't cancel. How are they doing? I mean, obviously, tourism is their bread and butter. They have no income obviously coming in right now, but their outflow is still going. How are the tourism businesses kind of handling all of this?
Yeah, it's they've been on quite a journey, and I think I've been speaking to business owners literally every day since this started, and the emotional ride is just as tough as the practical ride. And I think it's in their very DNA to be welcoming people and to be hosting, and the idea of locking your gates, literally, which some of them are doing, and asking people not to come. I mean, actively promoting that you don't visit, I think is deep down quite a traumatic thing to do. They're handling it very, very well, in the sense of they've quite a lot of focus on keeping the communication outward towards the people who would have planned to come or might be planning to come. Certainly we went from the original panic and distress and that lockdown situation, which for tourism, it came probably a week before everywhere else, and it came very suddenly one Thursday and Friday. And that first week was difficult, and then people, obviously, to say the very least, and then people really moved through the handling that as much as they could, stabilizing the finances, working really hard with their teams, figuring out how to look after them, and then very much into this period now of accepting the situation is going on longer than originally thought, and using that time for really working hard on two things, like the fundamentals of the business, and then this phasing back up. I think a lot of people feel it's been a wonderful opportunity to look into their businesses, and it's something they hadn't done, and they feel they'll come back stronger. And right now they're really deconstructing the visitor experience. How exactly will this work when we come back under some kind of level of restriction still? So they're very much looking at the whole hygiene, reassurance, social distancing, how that will work, and still have that good Irish welcome with it. And that's top of mind right now. We're known for our welcome, and how can you welcome at a distance in the way we would have done before? So, but overall, I have to say I've been amazingly inspired by how well they're handling it and how the mindset has moved with this.
And I think that that's what I've been hearing too, is with the people I've been talking to, is kind of a refocusing. Did we lose what we first set out to offer? And how can we get back to the basis of what we did?
Yes, a lot of people speaking about it, I say a lot, it's by no means a scientific survey, but a chance to look at their ethos and their culture. And those words being used quite a lot, and coming back clearer and more solid and stronger, and it's a lot of people talk about their sense of purpose, and I guess that's what these kind of periods give you. They give you that chance to reflect, and people are taking that.
That's beautiful. Now, Pól, because you do work with for a newspaper, you are releasing news all the time, and some of the biggest titles that have stuck out to me in the last week or so have been that all summer festivals have been canceled, and that seems to be festivals of every shape, type, and size. No Tidy Towns competition going on this year, and I think the biggest one is that pubs might not be able to reopen until 2021. Obviously, the pub issue could change, but the other two won't. What what are you feeling as you see these titles come through, and knowing how much tourism means to Ireland and the people?
I feel it's hard not to. You feel like the shock is done, but every time you see a fresh announcement like this, it almost puts you back into that zone. We will have not in my lifetime remember a summer without GAA, for instance, an All Ireland final, no Galway races, electric picnic will probably not go ahead, etc. But so events of 5,000 or more people have been cancelled right to the end of the summer. That we know for sure. And the pubs issue is still up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen there. But I think what these announcements at least do is allow us to get a forward view over what the next couple of months will look like, and they help people start to plan around that. So you can't have festivals and events of 5,000 and more people. So that makes you ask then, well, what can you do? And I think that there's a consensus kind of emerging that a tourism recovery or reboot will start very ultra locally, that as restrictions start to gently ease, people in their communities may step back out and start to support the restaurants and the cafes and maybe other businesses that they weren't able to support at this time in a very carefully managed way. We're all going to have to feel our way through the new protocols, what the distancing will look like, what makes us feel comfortable, what needs to be done on a regulatory basis for hygiene. After that, I think you might see more of a regional spread. And finally, it will go national. We might start to be able to take those trips where we really want to get to the West Coast. We might want to go, cross border or to a holiday home in Kerry, wherever it may be. And it's only once we start to go through that process and iron it out that I think that's when it will start to dovetail with the return of international tourism. Now, I just can't give a time frame like that. I did a piece on the Canary Islands this week, who have a relatively low caseload, and tourism is their absolute lifeblood. And their most optimistic scenario would be to see international tourism return in October. So that's just one scenario. And that they had a sort of a phased basis approach as well, where Canary Islanders will support their tourism and leisure industry first, and then Spanish visitors, and then possibly international visitors. So you started by asking me, how do I feel? I still feel shocked, but I think that the cancellations, and at least the fact that we're having these conversations now, means we can start to get to grips with what needs to happen in order to reopen. Irish tourism is not, and Irish life is not going to look the same in 2020. But what it will look like, that's what we're starting to figure out.
Now, Tina and Paul and Stephanie, you can probably weigh in on this as well. Irish tourism over the last 5 years has just been building and building and building and building, almost to the point where some areas were reaching mass tourism, over tourism. Do you think that as tourism opens again internationally, that we're going to get back to the smaller, more cultural experiences as opposed to the larger, everyone is visiting the Ring of Kerry or the Cliffs of Moher? Do you think that it's going to change the way tourists come into Ireland and the things they choose to see and do? Anyone?
Yeah, I could speak to that. Absolutely. I think people are going to be more intentional with their travels. They're going to be, and I think, coming from, a US or an American mindset, people who I work with, they will probably be traveling in the exact same way, Pól, you mentioned that the Irish people will be. It will be very local. It'll be maybe then regional, maybe short haul flights, across the states, and then international travel. And so once they get to that international travel piece, I think that will be that'll be a while away probably for most people. And so doing long haul flights, doing big trips, lifetime trips, those are going to be very important, very intentional. I think there was a researcher in the Netherlands. He published a study that that the greatest happiness is actually found in the anticipation of a trip, and not in necessarily the trip itself. So we're going to have a long time to anticipate a trip like going to Ireland again, for the masses. And so in doing so, I think that people will be more intentional. They will have a focus on maybe the types of experiences they want, and maybe not so much the bucket list destination. Now, that being said, I do hope that, couched in kind of from what Tina was saying, couched in what businesses are doing as they're stepping back and taking a look at their business, they also do think about this idea of maybe, over tourism, and perhaps maybe we should put a bigger weight on maybe value over volume. But that remains to be seen. But I know that hopefully that's in people's consciousness at least a little bit now.
And I couldn't agree more. Paul, Tina, either of you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I noticed, Pól has an interesting piece in today's paper that I read this morning, and one of the observations he was making is you would hope, there's me taking your words, but it's, you would hope that will happen, but your gut kind of tells you maybe it won't, with an effort to get the economy moving again. But and I'm a bit disheartened myself by the amount of people who seem to be saying that you'd hope it, but I'm not really optimistic. And my hope is that this change will be driven by a change in visitor attitude, number one, which I do think people might be underestimating how much visitor attitudes might change to that. And like exactly what you said, Stephanie, they may be intentional in a way we're not expecting yet. And the other thing is, I think communities have probably been really changed by this as well. And the underbelly of mass tourism is the effect it has on communities. That's why it is an issue, really. And it obviously impacts the visitor experience. But we've certainly had this issue. It kind of flared up over the bank holiday weekends, where people were traveling to their holiday home, and would stay within 2 kilometers of their holiday home, but that might be on the west of Ireland. And there certainly was a strong resistance from local communities to that. And I live in one of those areas. People still traveled, and definitely the sentiment, I was kind of even surprised myself. Locals really resented it because they felt visitors had disregard for them. Where they'd always had a good welcome. And I've heard, people from other counties being interviewed and saying, this could leave a lasting kind of divide if that continued through the other bank holidays, for example. So I think possibly the voice of communities might become louder as well. And that would have an impact. I kind of feel the same. Pól wasn't saying this, but I feel that public policy will be to start driving the numbers again. And we do have a chance to be more strategic than that. So hopefully, that's my own sentiment in there as well. But I think communities and visitors will drive more than they have done in the past.
Excellent. So as we start to look at things lifting slowly, we will see, we will see flights. We won't see flights on the amount that they were. I mean, there were dozens and dozens of daily flights to Ireland from the US every day, but flights are going to have to start again. And when they do, what do you expect to see when flights are allowed into Ireland? What do you expect to see for, how many people they will even allow on a flight, or what we're looking at for prices? Do you have a gut feeling on any of that, Paul?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think, like it's been said, I think short haul will recover first and earliest. People will start, those flights will be available to people earlier. There will be heavy discounting when airlines are cleared to fly, because they will really want to stimulate demand. And I've spoken to Ryanair, for example, about this, and I don't see why other airlines would be different, but they're saying you're going to see historic sales. You're going to see sales like you've never seen before, just to get people back in the air, get the planes flying, get the confidence going, because the confidence is critical. Mm-hmm. I think long-haul travel is going to take longer. It's going to depend a lot on both ends, the destination you're leaving, the destination you're going to, and how in control of the situation they are and what checks they bring in. Airport journeys are going to change radically. People are going to want the reassurance of, and it's going to be regulated, that there could be anything from temperature checks like you're seeing in Hong Kong and Seoul, through to distancing in queues, to people mandated or instructed to wear face masks on flights and so on. So that may make a certain amount of people reluctant to travel. You may have an anxiety about foreign travel that lasts quite a while. So a lot of this will be about reassurance. I don't see any kind of significant return in terms of overseas travel to Ireland this year. I think winter is historically quiet, so I think you might even see a period of retrenchment this winter as well. But I do think 21, and touch wood on this, we'll start to see a more significant comeback. But it's dependent on so many things, Jodie. It's I know that we've sort of couched all of this in that it's speculation, but there are just a couple of things that are front of mind while people are thinking about how to travel.
That's right, and everything is just so dependent not only on the facts that come out and the way that different travel companies and airlines and everything are handling this, but it also goes back to the consumer and their feelings, and right now feelings are, up and down, and so hard to even gauge within yourself. So gauging the feeling of the consumer as they think about travel and venturing out is going to definitely be difficult. Tina,
can I just to respond very briefly, one of Tina's points, I think involving communities and local authorities and local areas in any kind of planning that goes forward on marketing is absolutely critical. We're all going to need to be on the same message in this, because if you get that kind of divisiveness happening, it's just not going to do anyone any favor. So that's critical, that's for sure.
That is so true. And Tina, I know that you work with a lot of small businesses. There are restaurants and pubs and B&Bs and small hotels that you work with. Have any of them been talking about how they're going to handle, if they are allowed to reopen? Obviously, there are going to be social distancing measures that are going to be coming in. Obviously, very difficult in a pub. Not, even difficult in a restaurant. Are there any ideas floating around about how they might handle these things?
Yeah, I suppose it very much depends on the type of business. Hotels and pubs would be, I think, most at a loss as to how to handle that, because they need a certain amount of numbers for the place to be viable, like a restaurant or anything like that. And they're definitely crunching the numbers. I was speaking with somebody from the bank this week who's supporting a lot of businesses, and it's this idea. It's an awful position to be in, weighing up, is there less of a loss if they just closed until this time next year than if they opened on a limited basis? In either case, it's a loss. So it's going to be that kind of, and they'll have to make the decisions earlier than we might know the situation. At what point do you decide, will I reopen at all this year? Because then you have to employ staff, you have to get trained up again. It's going to take, they would say, 6 or 8 weeks to have their teams back and their systems back and ready to go. So it's a very big decision for business owners. I think other types of businesses, that have an outdoors element, or they're more tours or attractions, they have more scope to manage the social distancing, and they are definitely just scenario planning. How do I do this with space? And they can do it. Again, you need more staff rather than less. That's the thing, to manage the social distancing. So you'll have less visitors with more staff to manage them. So crunching the numbers is difficult, really very difficult, with again so much uncertainty and speculation right now.
Jodie, you probably have the same conversation going in the States, but the state support for our tourism and hospitality is going to be, it's a no-brainer. There hasn't been a kind of any sector-specific supports announced, but our Irish Tourist Industry Confederation has been calling for things like a 0% VAT rate. Our Restaurants Association wants things like a reboot grant for people to be able to tool up and change their systems and get going again. Local authority rates waivers. Insurance is an issue. It's actually an expensive country to do this kind of business in. And if you're suddenly talking about a pub that can only run at 30% occupancy, or a restaurant, those maths just don't add up. Then people aren't going to do it for the good of their hearts. So there needs to be a joined up thinking, and there needs to be specific state support that needs to be rolled out quickly.
That's so true. That, I guess when you're a tourist into an area, you don't think about everything that goes into running this successful business. You're just there because they've made it such a successful business, and you want to enjoy it. So the back end business of the business is so well hidden, I suppose, that you don't take the time to think about everything that is going on and what will have to happen to continue to make it an enjoyable experience, but also make people comfortable with being there.
Yeah.
So, Stephanie, what do you think tourism is going to look like as we go into 2021? As I said earlier, Ireland tourism numbers have just gotten higher and higher over the years. This year was set to be, another record-breaking year across the country for tourism. And as we've heard, it's just tourism probably is not going to really happen, especially for international visitors, until next year. So what do you think next year will be like? Do you think it's going to pick up where we've left off, that we're going to have another big booming year? Or do you think that 2021 is going to, maybe reset by 5 years, where the numbers are going to be more similar to maybe 2015, 2016?
Yeah, I think the thing that we're going to see is it's going to be fits and starts. When you're two steps forward, one step back. I don't think that there's going to be a linear progression of anything for quite some time, years likely. I think it was the Delta CEO. He said that he didn't expect pre-pandemic levels until 3 years from now. Mm-hmm. So if you think of that, if that's the projection, for the airlines, the whole tourism industry essentially follows suit. But hopefully, it doesn't mean that, even though, pre-pandemic levels, they were actually very high, as you mentioned. So hopefully, it's the case that those people that had to reschedule their trips for this year, that maybe they took the voucher, or maybe it's, they have some reason or some confidence in traveling. Hopefully they reschedule, sooner rather than later. And the systems are in place to allow people to get that confidence to travel again. And once the confidence is there, once the system, I think it's two things: systems and confidence, across the board between destinations and home countries, as well as the airlines. As long as those three things kind of work together, that's when we'll see travel resume.
I think you can look. There's no precedence for this, but tourism has been resilient. And looking just back over the last 10 years, Ireland came out of a pretty nasty recession and global financial crisis at the beginning of the last decade. It needed some big reboots, things like The Gathering. It needed some strong marketing campaigns, and it took several years to get up and running to the stage where we started breaking record numbers and returned to the kind of figures we'd seen the decade before. So even if you took that as an indicator, Jodie, I think you can expect 2019 was a peak, and I wouldn't see us returning to that for at least 4 or 5 years. And that's totally dependent on what happens with this virus.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. So let's say, I know that we've said that there are going to be some amazing deals on flights as we come out of this. The airlines almost have to do it just so they can get people flying again. And people can come back and give, hopefully glowing reports on the cleanliness of the aircraft and all the safety precautions of the flight crew. But what do you think flights are going to look like then as we get into 2021, especially price-wise? Anybody have any thoughts on what that might bring? Nope, nobody wants to say it. I can tell. Everybody's thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I look, this is just a sense. I mean, we're all just putting straws in the wind here. If recovery goes reasonably well, no matter what happens, you're going to see consolidation. You're going to see less capacity as we go forward, longer turnaround times to cater for new hygiene requirements. So after that initial wave of sales, if all goes well and sort of treatments are rolled out and things are start to be controlled next year, I'd expect you to see, if the demand starts to recover, I can only see prices rising at that stage. But I'm not particularly an aviation expert. That's just my sense of it at the moment.
Yeah, and that's kind of my gut reaction to it as well. So Tina, dealing with accommodations, how do you feel their pricing is going to go? Obviously, Ireland has some very expensive accommodation that are very nearly always sold out, even with their exorbitant prices. But then we have, the family-owned B&B or the small boutique inn that are more moderate or even less expensive. Do you have a feel for what we might be looking at as these accommodations, especially the higher end ones, try to entice visitors to come back in? And will that roll over into the coming year, do you think?
Yeah, it's couched it all in speculation again. In general, outside of travel and tourism, the luxury end of everything is holding its own very well, and is even increased year on year. And back again, it's not everybody has lost their income. They've lost their means of travel, and they've lost, a lot of day-to-day expenditure. Therefore, they have a little bit extra. So I don't think there'll be an inordinate pressure on the high end to reduce their prices. There will probably be, if you can travel, there would be a demand for that. There'll probably be more of a pressure on the middle and lower end. And I think, just in the conversations I'm having, people really want to try and add value rather than lower their cost, which is always the ideal. But in the crash in 2010, 2011, 2012, there was a race to the bottom in prices amongst accommodation, and it really damaged the industry, and it really damaged the businesses within it. And I think there's always the fear that people will start underpricing each other, and we'll have to see if the kind of state supports came in that Pól was outlining there. I think we might prevent that happening, but there's no value to anybody in that happening, because the businesses will have come off a year of no income, and to then not, I mean, literally zero income, and that's unprecedented, really. And I don't know that there's an industry that's had a complete and utter cut off on income. So to think that they'd be discounting next year, I think they'll try their very best to hold some kind of reasonable price. But again, the fear factor will come in, and that we'll have to see. The experience of 2010, 11, 12 is still quite alive for people, I think. So
I think trust is going to play a huge part in this, that we will look for reassurance. So that may guide our booking as well. And luxury is at an advantage there, in that luxury brands, people tend to take them that bit more seriously. They're not solely price led. We may be convinced, rightly or wrongly, that they're more on top of hygiene and the situation going forward. We may look back to places we know, places we've been, both out of loyalty and because we've developed a relationship with those people. And that could look like a resort hotel, or it could look like a country house. There's been talk in Ireland as well that camping might be able to find an opportunity in this if it manages the health protocols well, particularly people with loyal cohorts of visitors who go back year after year. Remote kind of isolated properties, they could be country houses, they could be Airbnbs, where I think there'll be a big appetite for reunion holidays. I've seen that phrase come into my email inbox more often lately, where families like my own just want to meet with granny and granddad and friends, and they don't care if there's a pool or if there's an amazing restaurant nearby. They just want to be together, and they just might want somewhere to meet to do that. So they're just some of the other conversations that have been going on.
There is definitely a lot of conversation going on. And I want to thank all three of you for taking the time to join me today to talk about this. And as we've been saying, everything that we have kind of predicted is all speculation. But there is one question I can ask you to end this that is not speculation. So tell me, when restrictions are completely lifted and you are allowed to travel within Ireland to any place that you can, where is the first place you will go? Tina?
Oh God, I don't want to leave anywhere out. I want to go everywhere. I'll first be over to Lahinch Beach, that's for sure. I live quite near the Burn, really missing that as well. So we had planned in this Easter break that we were going to go to Sligo. It's just
Love
been on our
Sligo.
radar for a while, and we haven't made it as a family. We're probably going to do the trip there. So possibly Sligo once we've seen Claire again.
Paul?
I have a desire just to get out and gobble this country up. I was just feeling it today. You know, we've been talking very loosely about what kind of domestic coverage we can do when things start to free up a bit. We're going to look at staycation series, and I was thinking about just getting out in my car and asking people on social media to tell me where to go next and just spend 2 weeks.
I love it when you do those. You used to do that when you would go places. You would say, "I'm going here. What should I be sure to see?"
I feel like I need a fix of it. I feel like I've got withdrawal symptoms. But the one, just to throw one example at you, I was all set to do a walk in County Wexford from Curracloe. There's a place just heading south of it called Raven Point, which is a beautiful forested peninsula just down there. I was just going to go down for a day. It's about an hour and a half's drive from me, do the walk, video it, write it up. And it was one of the things that just got axed when we were all confined to home. So that's just an example of something I'll pick up as soon as I can.
And Stephanie, you, like me, your return to Ireland takes a little bit more time, a little bit more planning. So what are you thinking when you finally make it back? Where do you think that you are going to be sure to add to that itinerary?
I think I'm kind of like Tina and Pól. I think I really just want to be everywhere right now, and I just want to soak it all up. Certainly, I was just working on an itinerary for someone. They were doing the Waterford Greenway, and I have yet to do it. And so, yeah, and I'm really itching to get down and hop on the bikes. And I've got 2 little boys, and so hopefully by the time we get to go, I'll be able to rent a couple little bikes, and we'll come along and I'll do it together.
If I can make a recommendation, base yourself in Dunmore East. We were there for a week last summer, and it was so amazing.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody, I do want to thank you again so much for joining me today and for taking the time. This was an excellent conversation, and it was so good to actually see your faces for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
And
thank you for having us. Thank you.
And if anybody wants to let people know where they might be able to learn a bit more about you, I will give you that opportunity. Tina?
Yeah, anything about me is on my website, thetourismspace.com. That's probably the best place, and all the usual social media spots as well. So yeah, love to hear from anybody.
Paul?
You can find our travel coverage on independent.ie/travel. And I'm on social media at Pól Ó Conghaile, which is POLOCONGHAILE.
And Stephanie?
I am at infiniteireland.com, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram as Ireland Travel Coach.
Excellent. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks again to my guests today, Tina O'Dwyer, Pól Ó Conghaile, and Stephanie Chastain, for joining me and kind of sharing the ideas that we all have about Irish tourism. Hopefully, tourism will recover sooner rather than later, and you will find yourself on your own dream vacation in Ireland. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Android. Can't leave a review on your podcast app? Leave a review on the Ireland Family Vacations Facebook page, or take a screenshot and tag me at Ireland Family Vacations on Instagram with a few kind words. Questions or comments, you can always email Jody at IrelandFamilyVacations.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening. Slán go fóill.